Grandma, stay in the car. It's pouring.
Who's that man out there, Lacey?
A biker.
His bike dead. Everybody's driving right past him.
I know.
Lacey, how much money do we have left?
$5.
That's your medicine. My pills can wait.
Grandma.
$5, baby. That's gas home and nothing else.
He's soaked through. He's shaking.
Then you already know what you're gonna do.
I do.
Roll the window down, honey.
Sir? Sir? Sir, are you all right?
I'm fine, miss. Go on home.
You're not fine. Here, take it.
I can't take your last dollar, miss.
Everybody deserves to get home. Please.
At 19, Lacey pressed her last $5 into a stranger's frozen hand, never guessing what they would set in motion by dawn. The rain had not let up. Lacey pulled the sedan onto the gravel shoulder and left the engine running for the heat. The biker did not move toward her. He stood by his dead machine like a man used to being passed by. Up close, she could see the gray in his beard and the deep lines around his eyes. His leather jacket was soaked black. His hands were shaking, but not only from the cold. "There's a station about a mile up," Lacey said. "Let me take you that far." "I'll be fine, miss." "You keep saying that." He almost smiled. He looked at the warm car, then at the old woman in the passenger seat, and something in him gave way. They could not fit the motorcycle, so he wheeled it off the road and chained it to a guardrail. He folded himself into the back seat, dripping, apologizing twice for the water. "Don't worry about the seat," Ruth said gently. "It's seen worse." The station was a single bright box in a wall of dark fields. Millbrook was 20 minutes of empty highway in every direction. Lacey parked under the canopy and counted her money one more time, though she already knew the number, $5. She thought of the pharmacy counter that morning. She thought of her grandmother's pills, the orange bottle nearly empty. She thought of the gas gauge, the rent, the letter folded in the glove box that she had not told Ruth about. Then she thought of a man shaking on the side of a road while the world drove past. Inside, she put $2 of gas on the counter for his tank and spent the rest on a tall black coffee and a wrapped sandwich. The cashier, a tired kid named Toby, raised an eyebrow. "That for the biker?" he asked. "He's having a rough night." "Rough night for everybody, looks like." She carried the coffee out with both hands, the way you carry something that matters. The man took it and stared at it like it was the first kind thing he had seen in a long while. "I can pay you back," he said. "Give me an address." "You don't owe me anything." "Everybody owes somebody." "Then pass it on to the next person stuck in the rain." He went quiet. The steam from the coffee fogged his glasses. When he spoke again, his voice had dropped low. "My wife used to say things like that." He turned the cup in his hands. "She passed this spring. I've been writing ever since. Don't really know where to." Lacey did not fill the silence with easy words. She just stood with him under the canopy while the rain came down. Some grief does not want fixing. It just wants company. "I'm sorry," she finally said. "She sounds like she was something." She was everything. Ruth had rolled the window down an inch. "Young man," she called, "you eat that sandwich before it goes cold. That's an order." The biker laughed, a rough, surprised sound. He ate. When the tank had its $2 of gas and the coffee was half gone, he straightened, and some of the road came back into his shoulders. "What's your name?" he asked. "Lacey. Lacey Turner." Turner. He repeated it slowly,
like he was filing it away somewhere safe. And the boss in the car?
My grandmother, Ruth. She raised me. He looked at the two of them, the old woman and the girl who had given away her last $5 to a stranger. For a moment, he seemed to be memorizing their faces. You should get her home, he said. It's late. Will you be all right? I will now.
Lacey climbed back into the car. In the mirror, she watched him stand alone under the light, coffee in one hand, the other lifted in a small wave. She lifted hers back. Then the dark fields swallowed the station, and he was gone. It was a good thing you did, Ruth said. It was just $5, Grandma. No, baby, Ruth patted her knee. It was everything we had. That's different.
They drove home in silence, the heater ticking, the empty orange bottle rattling softly in Lacey's bag. She never asked the stranger's name. It did not seem to matter that night. All that mattered was that her grandmother was warm, and the rain had someone else to keep company now. By morning, that small kindness would come roaring back, louder than she could imagine. Morning came gray and soft over Millbrook. Lacey woke before the alarm, the way she always did now. The house sat at the edge of town, joined to a low cinder-block garage. A faded sign still hung above the bay doors. Turner and Daughter, Auto Repair. Her father had painted that himself. Samuel Turner had been the kind of mechanic people drove 40 miles to find. He fixed engines on credit. He fed strays. He died 3 years ago, on a Tuesday, under a truck he was repairing for free. Lacey was 16 then. She left school the next month. Somebody had to look after Ruth, and the bills did not stop just because a good man did. These days she worked doubles at Nora Bennett's diner on the highway. Coffee refills, cleared plates, tips counted into coffee cans labeled rent, power, and medicine. The medicine can was almost always empty. She was 19 and tired in a way sleep could not fix. She made coffee and checked on her grandmother, who was sleeping easier now. Then she opened the glove box and took out the letter she had been hiding. Final notice, it read. The words had not changed overnight. 3 years ago, her father had borrowed against the property to keep the garage alive through a hard winter. When he died, the small local bank sold that loan. A man named Dale Hayes bought it for pennies. Hayes owned half the empty storefronts on Main Street. He bought debt the way other men bought lottery tickets, betting that someone would fail. He had been waiting for the Turners to fail for 3 years. Now a developer wanted the corner. The garage, the house, the oak tree Lacey's father had planted, all of it cleared for a gas plaza. The letter gave her 11 days. A truck rolled into the lot at 9. Lacey knew the engine before she saw the man. Dale Hayes stepped out in a pressed shirt, sunglasses on a gray morning, smiling like he already owned the ground. Miss Turner. He looked at the garage like it disgusted him. Quaint little place. Shame to let it rot. It's not rotting. I keep it clean. Sentiment doesn't pay a note. He held up a folder. You're behind. Way behind. I've been more than patient. My father always paid you. Your father is dead. He said it flatly, watching her flinch. And you're a girl playing house. 11 days, Miss Turner. Then I sell. Lacey kept her chin level. She had learned not to give people like him the tears they came for. I'll have it, she said. Hayes laughed, soft and certain. No, you won't. People like you never do. He slid his sunglasses down. But you can keep dreaming. It's free. He drove off without looking back. Half the town owed money to Dale Hayes. That was how he liked it. A man in debt does not look you in the eye. Inside, Ruth was awake, sitting up against her pillows. Her face was the color of paper. Grandma, did you take your pill? I'm rationing them, baby. Half in the morning, half at night. They stretch further that way. Lacey's chest tightened. Rationing heart medicine was not a plan. It was a slow goodbye, and they both knew it. She went to the dresser and opened the small wooden box where her mother's things lived. Inside was a thin gold ring, the only thing of value left in the house. Her mother had worn it every day of her short life. Lacey closed her hand around it. She thought of the man at the gas station, of $2 of gas and a paper cup of coffee. She thought of how good it had felt to help someone when she had nothing. Then she put the ring in her pocket. The pawn shop opened at 10. "Where are you going?" Ruth asked. "To get your medicine, Grandma." "With what money?" Lacey kissed her forehead and did not answer. Some sacrifices are easier to make than to explain. She did not know that 100 miles away, a quiet man with a gray beard was on his phone. He repeated a name to people who answered him the way soldiers answer a general. Turner. Lacey Turner. Millbrook. She did not know that the road was already turning toward her door. 200 miles north sat a town with no name on most maps. There, a building looked like a church and ran like a family. It had been a feed mill once. Now, a faded patch hung over the door, a wheel wrapped in wings. Inside, men with gray in their beards drank coffee and kept watch over one another the way they had for 40 years. They called themselves the Iron Disciples. Most people just called them Trouble and crossed the street. Most people were wrong. Their president was a man named Walter Cole. The road had given him another name a long time ago. Everyone called him Diesel. He walked in near midnight, still smelling of rain, and the room went quiet. Diesel did not come home unannounced. He had been gone since spring, since the morning they buried Margaret under the oak by the chapel. A broad man named Hank Brooks crossed the floor. He had ridden at Diesel's side since they were both young and stupid. "We were about to send riders," Brooks said. "You drop off the earth, Diesel. 3 months." "I needed the road." Diesel set a paper cup on the bar, a gas station cup, empty now, the logo half rubbed off. He stared at it like it was holy. Then a girl found me on the shoulder, bike dead, pouring rain. "Somebody helped you?" "She gave me her last $5. Diesel's voice cracked on the number. Last 5. She had a sick grandmother in the car. No coat worth the name, and she spent it on a stranger. The room had drawn close to listen. These were men the world had written off. They knew exactly what $5 meant to someone who had only 5. "You get her name?" Brooks asked. "Lacey Turner. Millbrook." Diesel turned the cup slowly. "You know why this club exists, Hank. You know the story." Brooks nodded. Every member knew it. 40 years ago, a younger Diesel had been beaten and left in a ditch by men who did not like his kind. A poor woman had pulled over, the only one who did. She gave him bus fare and her own scarf and asked nothing back. He had sworn that day his brothers would always be the ones who stopped. "That girl is the woman who saved me," Diesel said. Same heart. 40 years later, same exact heart. He looked around the room at the men who owed their lives to one another and to strangers like her. Margaret used to say, "Kindness keeps its own ledger." His eyes were wet now, and he did not hide it. "I think the ledger just came due." Nobody in the room moved. They had buried their own. They had been buried by the world and dug themselves back out. A debt of kindness was the only kind they never let go unpaid. "What do you want to do?" Brooks asked. Diesel picked up the empty cup and held it like a man holds a memory. "Find out everything. Who she is, what she's carrying. His jaw set. Then put out the word. All chapters. Anybody who can ride. For one girl and $5? For one girl and $5. Diesel almost smiled. We ride at dawn. By 2 in the morning, phones were lighting up across 6 states. By 3, a name was moving through the Brotherhood like a current down a wire. Turner, Lacey, Millbrook. None of them slept. None of them asked why. When one of their own says a debt is owed, you do not ask. You start your engine. Lacey got back from the pawn shop with $40 and a full bottle of her grandmother's pills. The ring was gone. She told herself it was only metal. She almost believed it. She did not sleep much. Around dawn, she woke to a sound she could not place. It was low at first, a hum under the floorboards. Then it grew. It became a rumble, then a roar, then something the windows could feel. Thunder, she thought, but the sky outside was clear and pink. She went to the window, and her breath stopped. Motorcycles. Dozens of them. No, more than dozens. They came up the county road in a long iron river. Their headlights still burned in the early light. The engines shook the dust off the fence posts. They turned, one after another, into the lot in front of the garage. 10, 30, 60. They kept coming. By the time the last engine cut out, there were 100 bikes parked in formation outside the Turner house. 100 riders in worn leather stood beside them, silent, helmets in their hands. Lacey's first feeling was not wonder, it was fear. She had grown up hearing the stories. She thought of Dale Hayes and his threats. She thought of every way the world had taught her that men who arrive in numbers usually come to take, not to give. Grandma, stay inside, her voice shook. Lock the door behind me. Lacey, no! Please, just this once. Listen to me. She stepped out onto the porch with her chin up and her hands trembling. 100 faces turned toward her. She had never felt so small. Then the riders parted, and a man walked through them. She knew him before she could see his face. The gray beard, the slow, tired walk, the same leather jacket, dry now, with a patch on the chest she had not noticed in the rain. It was him, the stranger from the shoulder of the road. He stopped at the bottom of her steps. For a long moment, he just looked at her, at the worn porch, at the faded sign above the garage. Then Walter Cole, president of the Iron Disciples, lowered himself down onto one knee in the gravel and pressed his helmet to his chest. "Miss Turner," he said. His voice carried in the silence. "2 nights ago, you gave me your last $5. You didn't know who I was." "I still don't," she whispered. That's why it mattered. Behind him, 100 men lowered their heads. Lacey's hand found the porch rail. "I don't understand. Who are you?" "My name is Walter. The road calls me Diesel." He rose slowly. 40 years ago, I was beaten and left to die. One stranger stopped for me. One. She gave me what she had and asked for nothing. I built my whole life around that one act of mercy. He gestured to the riders behind him, to the long line of bikes. "Every man here was saved by somebody once. We made a promise. We pay kindness back wherever we find it. And 2 nights ago, in the rain, you reminded me it still exists." Lacey's eyes were burning. "It was just $5. "No, ma'am." Diesel shook his head. "It was everything you had. We know the difference." He turned and lifted his hand. What happened next, Lacey would remember for the rest of her life. The riders moved, not toward her, but to work. 2 men carried boxes of groceries up the steps. Another set a case of her grandmother's exact heart medicine on the porch, more than a year's supply. Lacey did not ask how they knew the name on the bottle. These were people who found things out. A woman in a riding vest climbed the steps and took Lacey's hands in hers. "I'm Dana," she said. "I ride with the Tennessee chapter. My husband and I run a pharmacy. Your grandmother will never ration a pill again. You hear me? Never again." Lacey could not speak. She nodded. A young rider, barely 20, set a paper bag on the rail beside her. Inside was a warm breakfast from the diner in the next town. "Hank said you work doubles," he mumbled, blushing. "Said you probably forget to eat." Then he hurried back to the bikes before she could thank him. Ruth had come to the doorway, despite being told to stay. She stood in her nightgown, one hand on the frame, looking out at the impossible morning. Diesel climbed the steps and gently took her free hand. "Ma'am," he said, "your granddaughter has a good heart. Somebody raised her right." Ruth looked at him, then at the 100 bowed riders, then at the medicine stacked on her porch. Tears ran freely down her face. "Her mother did," Ruth said. "And then I tried my best to finish the job." You did better than your best. Around the property, the Brotherhood had already found work. Men were up on the garage roof, replacing the shingles that had leaked for 2 winters. Someone was changing the bald tires on the old sedan. 2 riders were clearing the dead branches from the oak tree Lacey's father had planted. Up and down the road, curtains twitched. The same neighbors who had crossed the street for 3 years now stood on their porches in their robes. They watched 100 bikers fix a poor girl's house for free. Some of them looked ashamed. They should have. It was not charity. It did not feel like charity. It felt like a family that had been away too long, finally coming home to help. Lacey sank down onto the porch step, overwhelmed. Diesel sat beside her, his old knees popping. "You're crying," he said. "Nobody's ever," she started, and stopped. She tried again. "After my dad died, everybody disappeared. The whole town. Like grief was catching. Grief scares people who haven't lost enough yet." Diesel looked out at his brothers. "We're not those people." Lacey wiped her eyes and laughed, a wet, disbelieving sound. "This is the most insane thing that has ever happened to me." "Get used to it." Diesel smiled. "You're one of us now. You just don't have the jacket yet." For the first time in 3 years, Lacey Turner felt something loosen in her chest. It was not the rent, or the letter, or the fear. For one bright morning, it was simply gone. But across town, a phone was ringing in the pocket of a pressed shirt. Dale Hayes was about to hear that 100 motorcycles had rolled into Millbrook overnight. And Dale Hayes did not like surprises on property he already considered his. By noon, the Turner lot looked like a festival no one had planned. Someone had fired up a grill. The smell of burgers drifted over the fence where, for years, only silence had lived. A few of the riders had pulled out guitars. Ruth sat in a porch chair like a queen, a blanket over her knees, laughing at stories from men 3 times her size. Nora Bennett drove up from the diner with 2 trays of pie and her mouth hanging open. "Lacey Turner," she said, "what in the world did you do?" "I gave somebody a coffee, Nora. That's all." "That's never all. Not with you." Nora set the pies down and got to work feeding people, because that was her way of loving anyone. Lacey moved through the morning like she was dreaming. Diesel introduced her to riders from 6 states.
a welder, a nurse, a retired school teacher, a man who had once been homeless and now owned 3 garages. They were not what the world had told her bikers were. They were just people who had decided to stop driving past.
For the first time since her father died, the house was full of noise that did not hurt. Lacey caught herself smiling and did not stop it. She let herself believe for one warm hour that the worst was behind her. It was not. Across the road, a silver sedan sat idling under the trees. Dale Hayes watched the gathering through the windshield, his fingers tapping the wheel. He did not see a miracle. He saw a problem. He saw leverage slipping out of his hands. He made a call. "It's me," he said. "You still own that judge favor?" "Good, because I'm about to need every friend I've got." He watched 100 bikers laugh in a yard he had already promised to a developer. Doesn't matter how many of them showed up. Paper beats people, and I hold the paper. He pulled away slowly, and the shine of his car disappeared down the road. Inside the Turner yard, no one noticed. The music played on, but the clock had already started ticking toward a reckoning, and Lacey did not even know it had begun. The next morning, the engines were quiet, but the Brotherhood had not left. Some had taken rooms at the motel in town. Others slept in the garage they had spent a day making weatherproof. Diesel sat on the porch with coffee, watching the road like he was expecting weather. He was right. At 10, 3 vehicles came up the county road. A black town car, a county sheriff's cruiser, and a sleek silver sedan that everyone in Millbrook had learned to dread. Dale Hayes stepped out in a fresh suit, a thin smile, and a folder under his arm. Beside him walked Sheriff Cobb, a heavy-set man who had owed Hayes money for years and paid him back in favors. "Morning, Miss Turner," Hayes called. He climbed the steps without being invited. "I heard you had guests. Looks like a junkyard threw up on my property." "It's not your property yet," Lacey said. Yet. He liked the word. He let it hang. Riders began to drift in from the garage and the yard, drawn by the cruiser's lights. They did not crowd. They did not shout. They simply gathered, a wall of leather forming quietly behind the girl on the porch. Hayes ignored them. He pulled a document from the folder and held it up like a trophy. "This is an order of foreclosure, signed this morning. Judge Pruitt was very accommodating." He smiled at the sheriff. "Turns out your 11 days got shortened. You're trespassing now, sweetheart, on a property you no longer own." "That's not legal," Lacey said. "You can't change the date like that." "Can't I?" Hayes stepped closer. "Who's going to stop me? You? Your grandmother? These greasy drifters?" He looked her up and down, slow and ugly, the way men do when they want to make someone feel like nothing. "Let me explain how the world works, since clearly nobody did. People like you don't get to keep nice things. You get what you're given, and you say, thank you. Your daddy never understood that. Look where it got him." The yard went dead silent. Lacey's hands shook, but she held her ground. "Don't you talk about my father." "Or what?" Hayes pulled the case of heart medicine off the porch rail and dropped it onto the steps. Bottles scattered across the wood. "This stays. It's on my property. Everything here is mine now." From the doorway, Ruth made a small, wounded sound. Lacey did not turn. If she saw her grandmother's face right now, she would break. Then he did the thing the whole town would talk about for years. He took the foreclosure order, balled it loosely, and tossed it at Lacey's feet like he was feeding a dog. "Pick it up," he said. "Read it. Then get your sick old woman and your trash and get off my land." For one terrible moment, nobody moved. Across the road, phones were already out, recording. A few of the same neighbors who had watched the day before now watched again, hungry for the fall. This was the Millbrook Lacey knew, the one that looked away, or worse, looked on. Lacey looked down at the paper at her feet. She looked at the medicines scattered on the steps. She thought of her father, of the ring she had pawned, of 3 years of holding the line alone. Her eyes filled, and she hated that they did. Behind her, 100 men went very still, not afraid, the opposite, the kind of still that comes right before a storm breaks. Hank Brooks took 1 step forward, his jaw tight, his fists curling. "Brother," he said, low, "say the word." It would have been so easy. 100 to 2. The sheriff's hand was already drifting toward his belt, sweat shining on his forehead. One wrong move, and the whole morning would end in blood, and Hayes would get exactly the headline he wanted. "Bikers riot. Poor town terrorized." He had planned for the bikers to be the villains. Diesel understood that. He had been underestimated his whole life. He knew how the trap was built. So he did not give the order. Instead, Walter Cole set down his coffee, stood up slowly from his chair, and walked to the front of the crowd. He put one weathered hand on Lacey's shoulder. With the other, he gently turned her away from the paper at her feet. "Don't pick it up," he said quietly. "You don't pick up anything that man throws on the ground. Not ever again." He bent down himself, unhurried, and lifted the crumpled order. He smoothed it against his knee. He read it. And then, for the first time that morning, Diesel smiled. And it was not a warm smile. "Sheriff Cobb," Diesel said without raising his voice, "you served this on the wrong woman, and you're going to wish you hadn't." "Is that a threat?" the sheriff snapped. "No, sir." Diesel handed the paper to Brooks. "It's a promise. And unlike Mr. Hayes here, I keep mine." Hayes laughed, but it came out thinner than before. "Big words from a man in a dirty vest. You think you scare me? I have lawyers. I have judges. I have paper." "I know you do." Diesel's voice was almost gentle. "That's the part you should be worried about. Because we read paper too." He nodded once to a rider near the back. A quiet woman with reading glasses and a leather satchel stepped forward. She did not look like the others. She looked like exactly what she was. "This is Marin Ellison," Diesel said. "She rode up from Atlanta last night. She used to put men like you in prison for a living." The color began, very slowly, to leave Dale Hayes's face. "Foreclosure fraud," Marin said pleasantly, flipping open her satchel. "Falsifying a filing date. Predatory lending across state lines. You have been a busy man, Mr. Hayes. We have been busy too." For the first time, Hayes had nothing to say. Lacey stood between them, the girl who had given away her last $5, and felt the ground shift beneath her feet. Not falling this time, turning. Diesel leaned close to her ear so only she could hear. "Go check on your grandmother," he murmured. "Let us handle the paper. You've carried it long enough." Lacey climbed the steps on shaking legs. At the top she stopped, turned, and looked at Dale Hayes one last time. For 3 years she had been afraid of this man. Standing there, with 100 people at her back and the truth on her side, she finally was not. By that afternoon, the Turner Garage had become something it had not been in years. A place where people gathered to fix things. Marin Ellison set up at a folding table in the open bay. Her laptop hummed beside files spread across the workbench where Samuel Turner had once rebuilt engines. Diesel stood at her shoulder. Lacey sat across from them, listening. "Your father's original loan was clean," Marin said. "Small, honest, the kind of note a local bank writes for a neighbor. Then Hayes bought it, and everything changed." She turned the laptop so Lacey could see. He doubled the interest rate and backdated the paperwork. He added fees that do not exist in any law I know. And when your father died, instead of working with the family, he started the clock toward foreclosure the very next week. Lacey stared at the numbers. He was waiting for my dad to die. He was counting on it. The words landed hard. Marin softened her voice. But here is the thing about men like Dale Hayes. They never do it just once. Greed is a habit, and habits leave a trail. She was right. Word had spread through Millbrook overnight, faster than the engines had. By 2 o'clock, people began arriving at the garage. Not to gawk this time, to talk. An old farmer named Earl Hollis came first, hat in his hands. Hayes had taken 60 acres from him with a contract he never fully understood. A widow named Carol Reed came next. Hayes had bought her late husband's debt and tripled it, then took the hardware store the man had run for 30 years. One by one, they came. A barber, a mechanic, a retired teacher who had co-signed a loan for a grandchild and lost her savings for it. Each of them carried the same shame Lacey knew so well, the quiet belief that being poor was somehow their own fault. Marin listened to every one. She made copies. She built a file thick enough to break a man. Every page was another family Hayes had broken. "This is no longer about one foreclosure," she told Diesel. "This is a pattern across 3 counties. Fraud, conspiracy. He had a judge in his pocket and a sheriff on his payroll. We can take all of it down." Diesel nodded slowly. "Then we do it right. No fists. No headlines about bikers. We let the paper do the talking." He looked over at Lacey, who was sitting with Carol Reed, holding the older woman's hand while she cried. "That girl spent her last $5 on a stranger," Diesel said quietly. "The least we can do is give this town its backbone back." By evening, the garage was full. Not of grease and engines, but of people who had been afraid for years and were not afraid anymore. They drank Nora's coffee. They signed Marin's statements. They told their stories out loud for the first time. Lacey moved among them, and something settled in her that she could not name. For 3 years she had felt utterly alone. Now she understood she never had been. They had all just been suffering in separate, silent houses. Tonight, the houses had opened their doors. Diesel found her by the open bay door as the sun went down. "Tomorrow we file," he said. "Everything, all at once. The fraud, the witnesses, the records. By the time Hayes wakes up, the ground will already be gone from under him. And if he fights? Oh, he'll fight." Diesel almost smiled. Men like him always fight, right up until the moment they fold. Lacey looked out at the lot, at the bikes and the lamplight and the people who had become, in a single day, something like a family. "Why are you really doing all this?" she asked. "The truth." Diesel was quiet for a moment. He watched the last light fade over the oak tree her father had planted. "Because 40 years ago, I was you," he said. "And the only thing that saved me was that one person refused to look away. I have spent my whole life trying to be worth that. Tonight, for the first time in a long while, I think maybe I am." He put his hand on her shoulder. "Get some sleep, Lacey Turner. Tomorrow, the world finds out what your $5 were really worth. Dale Hayes came back the next morning, and he did not come alone. He brought a lawyer in an expensive coat and the confidence of a man who had never lost. He expected to find a frightened girl and a crowd that would scatter. Instead, he found the whole town waiting for him. They filled the Turner lot. Earl Hollis, Carol Reed, the barber, the teacher, the families. The 100 riders stood among them now, not as outsiders, but as neighbors. And on the porch steps stood Lacey, with Diesel at her side. Hayes stopped at the edge of the gravel. He recovered quickly. "Quite a crowd," he said. "Doesn't change a thing. I hold the note. The law is the law." "You're right," Diesel said. "The law is the law. Let's talk about it." He came down the steps, unhurried, and stopped a few feet from Hayes. "You think you know who I am," Diesel said. "An old man in a dirty vest. Let me introduce myself properly." He nodded to Marin, who stepped forward with a leather folder. "My name is Walter Cole. I founded the Iron Disciples 40 years ago with 9 men and 1 promise. Today we are 11,000 strong across 40 states." He paused. "We also run a foundation, hospitals, shelters, a community bank for people the big banks throw away." Hayes's lawyer leaned in and whispered something. Hayes waved him off. The lawyer's face had changed. He had recognized the woman with the folder. Everyone in his world knew the name Marin Ellison. She had spent 15 years as a federal prosecutor before she walked away. People like Hayes paid lawyers a fortune to never end up across a table from people like her. "Congratulations," Hayes said. "I still hold the Turner note." "You did." Diesel let the words sit. "As of 9 o'clock this morning, our bank purchased every loan you sold across 3 counties. Every note, every lien, including this one." The lawyer went pale and reached for his phone. "It's true," Marin said. "The sale is recorded. The funds have cleared. Mr. Hayes, you no longer hold a single dollar of debt in this town." For a moment, Hayes could not speak. Then his face twisted. "Then I'll sue. You overpaid for garbage paper. Those loans are mine, legally." "They were," Marin said, "and every one of them is now evidence. Backdated filings, forged signatures, interest rates that violate 3 state statutes. We bought the proof of your crimes, Mr. Hayes, and we're about to hand it to people you cannot bribe." 2 plain sedans turned into the lot. The men who stepped out wore no leather. They wore badges from the state attorney's office. Marin had ridden with one of them years ago before she traded her own badge for a motorcycle. The crowd parted to let them through. "Dale Hayes," the lead agent said. "We have questions about a great deal of paperwork. Quite a few of them involve a judge named Pruitt and a sheriff named Cobb." Hayes looked around wildly. The lawyer was already backing toward the car. The sheriff was nowhere to be seen. For the first time in his life, no one was on his payroll. "This is a setup," Hayes hissed. "No," Diesel said. "A setup is what you did to a dead man's daughter. This is just the bill coming due." He reached into his vest and pulled out the foreclosure order, the same paper Hayes had thrown at Lacey's feet. He held it up so the whole town could see it. "This is the paper you used to scare people for years," Diesel said. "Let me show you what it's worth now." He tore it in half, then in half again. The pieces fell into the gravel where Hayes had once tossed it. The crowd erupted. Years of fear broke open into something loud and bright. Earl Hollis was weeping openly. Carol Reed was laughing. Nora Bennett was hugging strangers. Lacey stepped down off the porch then. She walked up to Dale Hayes, close enough that he had to look at her. For 3 years he had made her feel small.
She wanted him to see she was not small at all. "My father paid you every month, even when it meant we went without," she said. "He was twice the man you'll ever be, and he never once threw paper at anyone's feet." Hayes opened his mouth. For once, nothing came out. The agents led Dale Hayes away in handcuffs, past the very people he had stepped on to climb. He did not look powerful anymore. He looked exactly like what he had always been, a small man who had only ever felt big when someone else was on their knees. When the cars were gone, the lot fell quiet. Lacey came down the steps slowly. She stopped in front of Diesel, this stranger she had handed $5 to in the rain, and found she had no words big enough. "I don't know how to thank you," she finally said. "You already did," Diesel smiled. "2 nights ago, in the rain." He turned to the crowd and raised his voice so everyone could hear. "People are going to ask why 100 bikers rode across 6 states for a girl and $5. So here's the answer, and I want you all to remember it." The town went still. Kindness is the only currency that never bounces. He let the words land. Then he put his hand over his heart, and one by one, every rider in the lot did the same. It was not a salute to him. It was a salute to her. Lacey stood on the steps of her father's house, the house she would now keep. She looked out at a sea of people who had been strangers a week ago. The medicine was stocked, the roof was fixed, the note was gone, and the man who had haunted her for 3 years was in the back of a car, headed somewhere he could not hurt anyone. But the thing that filled her chest was not victory. It was something quieter. It was the feeling of being seen after years of being invisible, of learning that the small good thing she had done in the dark had not vanished. It had traveled and multiplied and come roaring back when she needed it most. Ruth made her way out onto the porch, steadier now than she had been in months. She slipped her hand into her granddaughter's. "Your father would be proud of you," Ruth said. "Not for keeping the house, for who you were when you had nothing." Lacey leaned her head on her grandmother's shoulder. Out in the lot, an engine turned over, then another, then 100 more, not leaving, just rumbling to life like a heartbeat, like the sound of a promise being kept. For the first time in 3 years, Lacey Turner was not afraid of tomorrow. The Iron Disciples did not ride off into the sunrise. They stayed. Over the next weeks, they did what the Brotherhood did best. They fixed things. They rebuilt the garage bay by bay, replacing tools that had sat rusting since Samuel Turner's last day. They repainted the old sign, brighter than before. Turner and Daughter, Auto Repair. Open again. Word traveled the way it does among riders. A Turner wrench was honest. A Turner welcome was warm. Within a month, bikes lined the lot most weekends, their riders drinking Nora's coffee and waiting on an oil change they did not really need. The garage that had nearly died became a place people drove 40 miles to find, just as it had been when Lacey's father ran it. Ruth held court from her porch chair, a blanket over her knees, never short of company or her medicine again. The color had come back into her face. She laughed more in those weeks than she had in years. And Lacey worked, not in fear now, but in joy. She had her father's hands, it turned out. Diesel taught her the rest, leaning over an engine beside her, the way a man teaches family. One afternoon, Dana pressed something small into Lacey's palm. Her mother's gold ring, bought back from the pawn shop. "Some things," Dana said, "are not meant to leave a family." On a bright Saturday, the Brotherhood gathered in the lot one more time. Diesel called Lacey to the front. In his hands was a folded leather vest, worn soft with age. "This was Margaret's," he said. She rode with me 40 years. I never thought I'd find anyone worth giving it to.
He held it open. On the back, beneath the club's winged wheel, someone had stitched a single new word. Turner. "You're one of us now," Diesel said, his voice thick. "Officially. You and Ruth both." Lacey could not speak. She turned so he could help her into it. The vest fit like it had been waiting for her. Diesel looked at her for a long moment, and his eyes were wet again, but softer this time.
"Margaret would have loved you," he said. "She always said the world wasn't out of good people, just out of patience. You proved her right." The riders began to clap, then to cheer, 100 rough voices lifting over a small garage in a small town. Lacey stood there in the morning light, wearing a dead woman's vest with her own name on it. Around her stood strangers who had become a family. She thought of a rainy night and 5 folded dollars. She had given away everything she had, and somehow she had gotten back more than she ever dreamed.
Months passed. Spring turned the oak tree green again. The garage thrived. Lacey hired Toby as her first apprentice. Ruth taught a generation of bikers how to make a proper pie. And on the first weekend of every month, the rumble returned, as riders from across the country made the pilgrimage to a small town called Millbrook. They came for an oil change. They stayed for the story. Every one of them heard it eventually, told over coffee on the porch. How a girl with $5 to her name gave it to a stranger in the rain, and 100 bikers came to her door. Dale Hayes was convicted on 12 counts. The families he had robbed got their homes back, one by one. The judge and the sheriff who had helped him lost everything they had traded their honor for, and Lacey Turner, who had once counted pennies, learned the truest thing the road had to teach, that kindness is never wasted, that it travels farther than you will ever see, and that sometimes what you give away in the dark comes back at dawn, riding 100 engines louder than thunder. If this story moved you, tell us in the comments about a stranger who once showed you kindness. Share it with someone who needs the reminder. And subscribe so you never miss the next one.